Good evening and welcome to another episode of the Taco Society Presents. I'm here with Phil Perone.
Tony,
how are you?
How
Good
you
to see you again.
It's good to see you as well.
We're missing our third party here.
We are, yeah. She had some stuff that she had to deal with at home, and hopefully she's supposed to be joining us next time.
Yeah, let's hope so.
Yep.
We miss you, Sydney, and I know you're watching this, and hopefully we'll be together again at least in August. In July we have Nikon. We take July off, and we usually do our filming there. So the next time we'll see you will be in August, if not before then for some other reason. But we look forward to you coming back. So it's been hot as heck out there.
Yep. It's today or yesterday, the first day of summer?
Today, I think. Today, yeah. 21st.
21st, yeah. So today is,
Yeah, it's been in the 90s almost the whole time, though we did have some great thunderstorms.
We did.
Yeah.
I saw that you were on your porch and drinking some scotch and smoking a cigar.
I love to do that during thunderstorms. The worse they are, the more fun I have.
I was outside walking the dog when it happened, so I had to
you
pull
got
back
caught?
home. Yeah, I got caught. So
at least I stayed dry.
Yeah, good for you.
We've got some really good guests tonight, and they're both going to take a little bit of time to talk to. So we're going to make this part of the show a little bit short. Have you got any news before I start mine?
I actually went to Scaricon, which is a convention out in Springfield. It was earlier in the month of June, and I met one of our guests there, as a matter of fact, as well as a movie director, Garo Ngogin, out of Cambridge, Massachusetts, and there was a number of other authors that none of us knew, but they were selling their wares, and so that was good. It was a good time, and our guests will probably verify it as well.
Yep.
And also a book that you're going to be in Vocations.
That you're publishing.
Yeah, that's right, I am. And we do have an official person that's writing the foreword, and a Hollywood actor named Daniel Lynch, who's been in a number of horror films. Yeah. So he just turned in a third copy of it. He's really into the whole process. So
is this his first forward?
First time.
Huh?
Yeah. So
good for him.
He's been nominated for a number of awards at movie conventions, the festival circuit. So it's good stuff. But otherwise, the book is coming along, and we got a great editor, Gregory Norris.
Greg Norris,
yeah. Oh, and MJ Preston's doing the cover.
Oh, is he?
Yeah.
Oh, geez, you got an all-star lineup there.
Yeah. So a lot of good folks in it. Eric S. Brown's going to be in it, and so forth.
And the release date?
It's going to be late to midsummer.
Okay.
Yep.
The last I heard from Greg was September 1st.
That's when we're having a big party up in his area.
I thought that was the 17th. Okay, maybe I'm
well,
confused.
the first is when he was going to announce the party to
all. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
I just.
Yeah.
I blew it.
Yeah. So
sorry, Greg.
but then again, to be honest, it may be September 1st would be the date of the release as well. So,
okay.
Which is still late summer.
Yeah. Great. Yeah, I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah. It's going to be a good book.
Yeah, it sounds like a lot of fun.
Yeah.
That it?
I don't know. Let me think it over. But I know you have some stuff.
Yeah, I got a few things. Last night was, and I missed this. I kicked myself in the butt. Real Yours was in Exeter, New Hampshire with Joe Hill, and they had an interview type signing where Joe Hill interviewed Real Yours for his new book, The Forever Girl. I'm just angry at myself for missing that, but I heard it went very, very well. So
I believe one of our guests went there.
He did, yes. Scott did, yeah. We'll get into that in a little bit. And Bracken McLeod's book, Come to Dust, will be released this Friday. Tomorrow night, as a matter of fact, I'm going to see Bracken. He's doing a promotional reading at, I believe it's Pandemonium in Cambridge, Mass.
Oh,
yeah.
A lot of stuff goes on.
A lot of stuff does. Yeah. And also he announced today that he's being represented by Howard Moorheim Literary Agency. So good for him. He's got an agent.
Nice.
So he's made the big time.
Now, who's publishing his new book?
The new one, I think this one is Cemetery Dance, Come to Dust.
Very good.
If he's got another new one, I'm not sure.
Right.
But that's the one I know of. And 13 Views of the Suicide Woods was...
the Canadian press thing.
Yeah, Chizine. I say it wrong all the time.
I think that's how it is pronounced. Yeah.
But that's who did that one. And that one's done very well. Very well. today was National Selfie Day.
I did not know that.
Yeah.
I was working. I had my head to the computer all day.
All day?
Yeah, I didn't really get to check anything. Yeah.
Well, there were a lot of selfies out there on Facebook today.
Was there? Okay.
Yeah, I don't know how to take a selfie. I've never done it.
Yeah,
I don't have a camera phone, so.
Yeah, I do it at the horror conventions and the
Yep.
writing conventions that we go to.
Yep.
That's how I
Yep.
usually do it. I've done a couple with you. So
Yeah.
you've actually been in them, even if you haven't taken
If
them.
I haven't taken them.
That's right.
Yeah. And finally, some really, I think, exciting news from Holly Newstein Hodela. Rick Hodela, her husband who died a little while ago. I say a little while ago, it's been a couple of years now.
Yeah, he passed away about 3 years ago, I think.
Yeah, but it's about 3 years.
Yeah.
His papers will be housed at the Maine State Library. That's 30 years of manuscripts, correspondence, promotional pictures, and other miscellaneous stuff. And it's going to be housed in the library that's really devoted to Maine writers. So that's quite an honor. And I feel really good for Holly and for all his fans that the library is going to house all his work.
That is a great honor.
Rick considered Maine home, so it just all works out well.
Yeah, I didn't even know if he was from anywhere else because I always known him as from Maine.
And same here. Yeah, I'm not sure if he was or not, but he's
his ancestors are from Finland, though. But yeah, I think he came up in the '70s when he was in Maine.
Oh yeah. He was one of those. I'd read him. I've always known about him, and he was one of those guys. When I met at Nikon in 2009, I was just starstruck. He's just like, wow, that's Rick.
Yeah, I met him at the second Anthocon about 4 years ago. And, yeah, he was a great guy. I talked to him for a bit, and nicest guy.
I got to know him at the third and fourth Anthocons, and we spent, I want to say, hours together. I was just, out of my mind. He was so great to talk to. And he talks, and he loves to talk. He loves to talk business.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
So that's all I got. How about you?
Yeah, I think that's pretty much it.
We're back, and we're here with our guest, Scott Goudsward.
There you go.
Scott, it's good to have you back.
Phil. Good to see you back, Tony.
Good to see you.
Good to see you back, like you've ever left.
Scott is not only a friend of the show, you've been on a few times, but he's a personal friend. And I've known Scott for, I'm guessing, 8-9 years now. It's been a while.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's been a great friendship. And I guess I'm telling the whole world. Thank you.
I met Scott at the first Anthocon.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So
I miss Anthocon.
Oh,
yeah,
so
fun.
do I. Jeez.
So, Mark Woolley, if you're watching, bring it back.
Yes. Or Jacob Haddock.
Haddad.
Jeez, don't. When it comes to names, I'm the worst. Okay.
Well, he always goes your hometown, Haverhill.
Haverhill.
Or something like that.
More like Haverhell, but we don't go there.
You got a bio to read.
Yes, I do.
Yes.
I do. I have a bio about Scott. And here
Indeed.
we go. Scott T. Goudsward.
You hurt me, Phil.
Goudsward.
All right, here we go. By day, Scott is a slave to the cubicle world. By night, a slave to the voices in his head. He writes primarily horror, but has been known to branch out with sci-fi and fantasy. Scott is one of the coordinators of the New England Horror Writers and an active member of 2 local writers' groups. His short fiction has most recently appeared in Anthology Year 3 and Atomic Age Cthulhu. His latest novel, Fountain of the Dead, is out from Postmortem Press, and a new nonfiction book, Horror Guide to Florida, also has been released.
Kind of old.
However, he does have 2 new books, which he will be talking about tonight.
Yes.
And you can find him on Facebook and all the wonderful places.
On the Book of Faces and all electronic dealerships.
You remembered. We're going to take 30 seconds for you to talk about the NHEW. Can you just give us a little bit of background on it and what it is you do?
The NEHW is a group throughout New England of writers, horror writers, actors, screenwriters, comic artists, who write horror, sci-fi, fantasy. We have an online group on the Book of Faces. We have a fairly heavily Twitter follower, so I'm not using the actual names, so you see I'm doing work in the
You're doing well, yeah.
We've been around since about 2001. I've been sort of directing it for 4 or 5 years now. I run it with Dan Cohane and Dave Price. Dan's been with the group since the muddy beginnings of the thing.
Okay. Well, you're here to talk about books, so we're going to jump right into that. We got 2 of them, so we're going to try to get both of them into this conversation before the time is up. Let's talk about your newest entry first, and that's the Horror Guide to New England.
It is.
Northern New England.
Northern New
England.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about what a horror guide is, and which parts of New England, northern New England, it covers?
The horror guides are basically a geographical index to where horror is set in the different locations. So it covers short stories and novels and movies and filming locations. There's some actual folklore, some actual famous deaths, and some, just odd stuff we've crammed in there on the side too. This particular book covers Maine, New Hampshire, and Vermont. The previous 2 books were Massachusetts and Florida.
Yeah, I read the Massachusetts one and thoroughly enjoyed it. I have a feeling that I might be in this new one.
I think so.
I think so, yeah.
I think he might be too.
Yeah, we're both in that. Tell us about your research. How do you find the information for these entries, and what do you do for fact-checking?
David and I talked to a lot of different authors. David is a librarian and a historian by trade.
Is your brother?
Right. David has been the workhorse for these books since we started them 10 years ago. We go to blog sites, we go to book review sites. We spend a lot of time on Amazon looking, just typing in the location we're looking for. For movies, you go to movie review sites. You find out where things were filmed, where things were shot. Go on IMDb, look for what they have listed for locations there.
That sounds exhausting.
It can be.
So you put in a keyword, say New Hampshire,
Right,
or
New Hampshire, Vermont, Massachusetts, Boston, Manchester, whatever.
and up comes the movies, and that's where you take it.
It brings up the locations. It says what was filmed where and when,
Mhm.
and then you have to just sort through them all, see what's horror, what's dark, or what's happy, slappy, romantic stuff, which we don't put in the book.
You just said that the book is a mixture of nonfiction and fiction when it comes to horror. Let me ask you about the nonfiction first. Any creepy stories in there that you can share with our audience?
I think it was last year, or early last year, David and I went for a road trip.
Mm-hmm.
We were going to Portland to go to the Green Hand bookstore.
The Green Hand?
Green Hand, run by Michelle Solier.
Okay.
She runs a newsletter called Weird Maine.
Oh,
It's
okay.
fantastic. Actually, Rick's collection is in the bookstore.
Oh, okay. All right.
And I spent a lot of money there, but we won't go there. But we decided to go to Moultonborough,
Okay.
and there was nothing in Moultonborough except for Claude Rains' grave.
That's right. I did know that.
So we drove out to Moultonborough, found the grave, took some pictures, and then drove to Portland.
What was the gravesite like?
It's a nice little quiet gravesite. I mean, it's a little it almost looks like some guy's backyard.
Oh, really?
And right in the middle of it is this big black stone that says Claude Rains on it.
That's all it says?
Yep.
That sounds like a fun thing to do, though. Spend some time and go see
Yeah.
Claude Rains' headstone.
Oh yeah.
And if you want to go for like a just a car ride, you go up to Barry, Vermont, to Hope Cemetery.
I've been there, yeah.
I'd love to go there.
Yeah.
Or you can go up to Bangor to do the Stephen King tour of Derry. It's a walking tour. It takes about like 3-4 hours.
Oh, does it take that long?
Yeah, it's awesome. I'd love to do it.
Is it self-tour?
No, they've got tour guides who do it.
Nice.
Kind of like walking around Salem, Mass. They've got like just different people who go through and just lead tours.
Oh, that's great.
So you go through Derry, see where the drain pipe is, and see where the sewer is from it, that kind of stuff.
That's cool.
I'd love to do that one of
That's
these days.
What made a story or an article worthy of inclusion?
A lot of argument and bickering back and forth with me and my brother.
I can imagine. What was the final rule of measurement, or whatever you want to call it?
I vetoed a lot of stuff that he wanted, and he vetoed a lot of stuff I wanted, but
Really?
it had to be horror related, pulp related type of stuff.
Give us an example of something that didn't make it.
Self-published stuff.
Okay.
And strict ebook stuffs. We just started putting some self-published books in this one. We have some stuff in there by Dawn Gray and Anana Arthin,
Oh, yeah, she's great.
and I'm glad I got her name
Oh,
right.
she's great.
She's
Oh,
a wonderful person.
I've interviewed her so many times.
And I think this was the first time we actually
It's her
used
birthday today,
self-published.
by the way.
Happy birthday, Anana. And, that's what we did. And there's a lot of stuff we could have included, but it was just like ebooks on Amazon. Oh, I used the word.
Oh, that's okay.
On that retailer online. But, I mean, if I had a horror element or a dark element, or if we could trace back, like, if it's a story set in, like, we'll say Derry, Maine, or Castle Rock, Maine, that King didn't write, we could probably try to squeeze that in.
Gotcha.
Or if it was a movie that, say, John Cusack was in, because he was in, Stand By Me for 5 seconds.
Yeah.
So we got him in there. We did
That's cool. Yeah.
when we did the Massachusetts book, we have the Dropkick Murphys in there.
Okay.
Because they do a song called Skinheads on the MBTA. And we kind of worked that in with the Kingston Trio song, because one of the guys from the Kingston Trio song, Kingston Trio, is buried in Cambridge.
Oh, geez. So this is all the information you get in the book.
Yeah.
See, that's great. That's what I love. I love reading that kind of stuff. It's like a New England list of horror list.
Yeah,
You just
exactly.
go through it, and it's just great.
It's indexed by town and by people.
You got a question?
Yeah. Actually, Scott, I know your other books. I've seen them, but the new one has a foreword by someone of note. And why did you choose that person? And who is that person? Let folks know who it is.
That would be J.W. Ocker. He is a blogger and author. He does a site called OTIS, The Oddest Things I've Seen. And I think for a while he wrote for Atlas Obscura, but don't quote me on that. I might be wrong. And his last book, he rented an apartment in Salem for the month of October. And that was his research, and he released that last year. And that's a pretty fun little book.
Yeah.
And
Sounds like it would be.
I had it with me in the pile to bring today, and I left it at my house.
Oh, jeez.
But he's a good guy. We met him at Necronomicon a couple of 3 years ago.
Wow. Did you get to talk to any really cool people or cool authors?
I'm going to drop 2 names. I'm going to drop Joe Citro.
Love them. Yeah, I was
And
hoping
Steve
you would.
Bissett.
They're both are great guys.
We were at Nikon last year, and Steve came over and said, "Hey, this is wrong. You got to fix this." I'm like, "Okie doke." So I dropped out on David, and there was some arguing and bickering.
Yeah.
And then I talked a lot to Joe. Last year, I think it was last year, I met R. Patrick Gates for the first time when he joined the NEHW. That was pretty cool.
That is cool. Yeah. I read all his Grimm stories and
Yep.
television. There's a few others.
I read a few of his novels back in the day.
Yeah. But Joe Citro,
Joe's awesome.
he's awesome. I actually got a chance to sit and have breakfast with him. We spent about 90 minutes talking.
Nice.
And, it was one of the most fun times I had.
He is supposedly coming to the Halloween Book Fair
That's right,
Festival
yeah.
in Haverhill,
Yeah, that's in October.
October 23rd,
Yeah,
I think.
we'll be talking about that. I love Joe. Can you take a moment and read a couple entries for us? One nonfiction, one fiction, and one that you really like.
Sure. Now
Grandpa?
now the glasses go on,
Yeah.
so I can actually read. I even marked them off last night, so I'd have something to talk about. I'm going to start off with Northbrook. During spring cleanup week, Jeremy McCall finds a new window frame with the glass intact, which might work when he remodels his shed. When he looks through it, he discovers that he can see people and their spirit animal. His wife, for instance, appears as a cat. Too bad he looked through the glass into a mirror in True Glass by Rick Howdala, published in Shivers 5. So that's a favorite,
Yeah.
because it's Rick Howdala.
We talked about Rick a little bit before.
Rick is
the
awesome.
show, yeah.
Wish he was still around. So I'm going to do some nonfiction. Franconia Ridge Road. Robert Frost and family returned from living in England and moved into the farmhouse they would call home from 1915 to 1920. Let's try this again. 1915 to 1920. And then as a summer home for another 19 years. 2 books of his poetry had been published in England, and the 1915 American release of the two, A Boy's Will and North of Boston, established him as the prominent poet of this time. Included in these first 2 volumes are such poems as Ghost House, Home Burial, and The Fear. Today, the Frost Place is owned by the city and serves as a Frost Museum and Poetry Center.
Well, you don't normally associate Robert Frost with horror.
You don't, but he's actually written quite a bit.
Yeah, yeah. And this is your favorite, one of your favorites.
This is one of my favorites. Goffstown, Church Street.
Oh, okay.
Buck is waylaid by 2 masked men who threaten him and his family unless he does what they say. He has to go to a pawn shop on Church Street and buy something called the Prexy Box. However, if it's not for sale, he is to acquire it by any means possible. The pawnbroker, on the other hand, as a few security measures are beyond the norm in The Pawn Shop by Tony Tremblay. Story first appeared in Wicked Tales 2015.
Oh, geez. Well,
Which is
thank
right
you
here.
very much. Yeah.
Me too.
Yeah, isn't that something?
I would like to state that I never met your brother, but he reviewed M.J. Preston's anthology,
Dark Highways?
Dark Highway Passages.
Dark Passages.
Dark
too.
Passages, yeah.
And I never met him, and he actually said my story was his favorite. So
Nice.
I got to give him.
That was a fun
dibs
book.
to
I got
that.
to read that. I bought the e-book of that because when I ordered the hard copy from an online retailer, I got it back and it was so heinously damaged I had to send it back.
Oh,
That's too
geez.
bad.
We're getting low on time, so we're going to move along here. So we're going to talk about your other new release, Twice Upon an Apocalypse.
Twice Upon Apocalypse.
Yeah.
Lovecraftian mythos and monsters mixed with fairy tales.
Tell us a bit about that, including who Lovecraft is and how you came up with the idea to marry these two together.
Lovecraft, H.P. Lovecraft was a Providence writer, wrote horror and pulp back in the 30s, and he kind of created his own universe.
Yeah.
The idea came from Rachel and I, my co-editor, were just throwing stuff back and forth one night for a different anthology, and that kind of came out of it.
Fairy tales.
Fairy tales and Lovecraft, because the first book was fairy tales and zombies.
The stories are the way the book's set up, and I did read the book and I enjoyed it. The stories are set up explaining the source material, meaning whatever the story was that the fairy tale basically, and how they took that fairy tale and wove Lovecraftian themes into it. Can you give us an example or two citing specific stories and show us how it was used to incorporate those Lovecraft themes?
First one I'm going to go with is Willie Meikle's story, The Pied Pipe of Hamelin.
Great story, yeah.
So it's got this kind of evil wizard guy wandering around, Hamelin, and he leads the rats away, but instead of leading them out of town, he drops them in like this giant cosmic pit. And then when the town elders come and welch on their deal, he leads all the children out and dumps them in the same pit.
Yeah, that was a great story.
That was a fun story. Or you could go with Pete Dudar's,
Another good
because
one,
Pete
yeah.
rocks.
Pete does. We were talking about Pete earlier again. Great
right.
guy, just a great guy.
Did a story based on Three Billy Goats Gruff. And there's a troll under the bridge. It's the end of the world. And the goats are coming across. The troll kills one, kills the other one.
I love that story.
And then the third one morphs into Cthulhu and just
Yes.
destroys the world.
Now, I have a question. Now, there's a big backstory about the history of the book and how it got published and finally, and also. So why don't you let us know about that backstory?
The first publisher, whose name I'm not going to mention to avoid anything, they were doing a giant Kickstarter for their role-playing game, and the books got lost in their Kickstarter. So there's no promotion. The first book came out and was basically forgotten about, and then the company just fell apart. The people who ran the company took all the money from the Kickstarter that was left and ran off with it.
Oh,
That's terrible.
So they got the new guys in. They have the new staff. They have the new money coming in, and then they lost the manuscript. They lost my emails with the electronic books. They lost the thumbnail I sent to them, and then I
you just got
pulled
the
it.
feeling this isn't working.
But I hope you still had a copy of the manuscript.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, good.
And then I started querying other places. I went to I won't say any names, but I went to about 7 other publishers to try to pitch this. And then Crystal Lake was actually the last place I approached, and they took it.
Joe, yeah.
I'm very thrilled about it. Joe's very good to work with.
Good.
Yeah.
I recommend him enough.
Oh,
glad-
yeah, he's a great guy.
I'm glad this worked out for you. Was this an open call, or did you invite authors?
We invited 3 people for this one. We invited Willie Meikle,
Yep.
Don DeMassa, and Pete Rollick.
Oh, okay.
Everything else was open call.
Great. There's not a lot of stories in here. You kind of kept it short.
We didn't get as many entries as this one as we did for the zombie book. The zombie books, I think it's got, I want to say 23. This one's got 17 or 18.
Okay.
And they're not the longer of the stories.
Yep. Aside from your own story, because you do have a story.
Yeah,
in
and it's
here.
not my favorite by far.
What is your favorite?
I've got 2. I've got Ken Vaughn's story, Donkey Skin,
Yep.
and oddly enough, Nina Arthen's story, The Fishman and His Wife. Probably 2 of my favorites from the book.
See, I loved Bracken's story.
Bracken's story was good.
For some reason, it reminds me a little bit of another story he had written, but I was just captivated from the first words to the end. I just said, "Wow, that was great."
It was a great story, and I didn't I had never heard of the fairy tale before, so I had to go look at the fairy tale.
Same here. Yeah, never heard of it.
There were a few of them like that I'd never heard of, so I had to go through and just go back and check them out and see if they're true to the story.
How about reading a little bit from the book?
Okay. PG-13?
PG-13.
Oddly enough, those are marked off too. I don't know if I should read Anana's or Ken's. I'm sorry, K.H. Vaughn. Go with Ken's. So this is based on Donkey Skin by Charles Perrault, and it's very true to the story where they have to smuggle someone out of a town by wearing an actual donkey skin to get her away from everything. The governor's wife was very beautiful, and I can still remember the look on his face when he staggered from the infirmary covered in her blood the day she died in childbirth. I forgot about that part. The governor wailed and moaned as soldiers rushed him off to his chambers to get him out of sight. It was not the grief broken across his face, but what that open display of raw despair meant for us that frightened me. Even as a child, I understood we needed our leaders to be strong. Even I could have explained why. He swore he would not remarry unless he found another so beautiful and perfect. Even now, there are many who don't blame the governor for what he did to his daughter, Ashley. They said he was old enough to see Ryla, which I'm probably pronouncing wrong, rise of the old high death screens, the black oblong altars filled with the old god's light before the grid collapsed. But no one alive then or since is untouched by the return. So that does not matter. It does not matter what gifts he gave her or what promises he made. It does not matter whether he was kind or beat her. She may have been the spitting image of her mother, but you can't replace what was after it was gone. And there are things that are right and things that are wrong, even if the degrees of the triangle no longer always add to 180 anymore. We'll stop it there.
That was an excellent story, yeah.
That was a great story.
They were all good. There wasn't one story in there that I didn't care for.
There was a lot of going, like, with what you're doing most anthologies, a lot of going back and forth. Who likes this story more? Who likes this one less? And Rachel and I were pretty much agreed on most of the stories in these books.
That's great.
Have you ever you the only person to choose stories in an anthology?
Yes, my very first anthology was called Traps, and I did most of that myself. My publisher at the time was getting a kind of she was helping out with the book, but for the most part it was my choices.
Well, we've gone way over the time. You're absolutely worth it. It was a great discussion, and we
Thanks
want
for having
you back.
me again.
Oh, we want you back again.
I'll be here next week.
Yeah. Scott's a friend of the show. Will always be a friend of the show. And thank you so much. It was
Thanks
a great
for having
interview.
me.
Yes.
Excellent,
Thanks for
Scott.
having me.
It's good to see you.
Yeah. And we'll be right back with our next guest, Jason Parent.
Well, we just spoke with Scott, and he was talking about an author from Rhode Island named H.P. Lovecraft. We have another author from Rhode Island, Jason Parent.
Just as famous.
Well, not quite, but thank you.
You will be.
It's good to have you on the show.
Nice to be here.
Welcome,
Thank you
welcome.
for having me.
Before we get into some of your work and questions, we do have your bio, and I think, Tony, why don't you
Yeah,
go
yeah.
ahead.
In his head, Jason Parent lives in many places, but in the real world, he calls New England his home. The region offers an abundance of settings for his writing and many wonderful places in which to write them. He currently resides in East Providence, Rhode Island. He is the author of the novels Seeing Evil, What Hides Within, and many published short stories, and Unseemly. Welcome.
Welcome. Actually, I just met Jason a month ago at the ScaraCon convention that I was just talking about in our intro. And even though we work with Scott and we know Scott and so forth, and we have a lot of friends that are mutual, never met, which is kind of odd. So when I met you, I found out on Facebook after linking up with you that you wrote a number of novels. So let's talk about them, because most of the people that we've interviewed on the show are mostly short story writers, and that's pretty impressive novels. So your first novel.
Well, you haven't read them yet, so.
Well, that's the thing. Since I just met you, it's a little tough to read all that in like 3 weeks.
Let's hold the impressive part.
All right, fair enough. I went down your bibliography of stuff, and your first novel that I saw was called Seeing Evil. and I noticed it was getting a lot of praise. The one thing I noticed is that it's about bullying and young people. It also even, with its supernatural elements, seems to tell us that the worst monsters are real, meaning people, rather than ghosts and so forth. Well, why don't you talk about it a little bit?
Well, Seeing Evil is about a detective. She's cold, calculating, and kind of the hard-boiled detective that you see a lot on TV. Doesn't really care about anybody or anything other than catching the criminal, until she meets this young orphan boy at a murder scene, a murder-suicide scene. The parents are dead, obviously.
Yeah.
So she kind of follows this boy through his life, almost as a surrogate mother, as he's passed around from foster home to foster home. And obviously her character begins to evolve. And the boy, of course, grows up and becomes a 14-year-old misfit in high school. And through another traumatic experience in this poor kid's life, he realizes that he has pretty much the Johnny Smith touch from Dead Zone.
Oh, jeez.
So, obviously, being best friends with a cop,
They pair up?
They pair up, and that's where the novel goes from there.
Sounds good.
Yeah, no kidding. How long has it been out?
That came out in 2015.
Oh, okay, that's pretty good. Now, another novel I noticed that you had was called People of the Sun, and based off of the blurb, I noticed that it seemed like a 1950s science fiction book, similar to, say, The Day the Earth Stood Still, or the Ray Harryhausen film It Came from Outer Space. I assume you are a fan of those old classic flicks.
I am, yeah.
Now, explain how you chose to write a science fiction story about aliens that are actually the good guys, rather than, or at least appear to be the good guys.
Well, you've kind of touched on, with your intro to Seeing Evil, a theme in my work, kind of a negative, pessimistic view of humanity as a whole.
I wonder why.
I'll keep politics and whatever else out of the equation. But anyway, yeah. So the book focuses on these 4 aliens that are forced to leave their civilization and look for natural resources, in order to survive. A catastrophe happens as they're leaving, basically stranding them as the 4 survivors of their race on Earth. At which point, through a series of miscommunications and just fear, misunderstanding, all stuff that we go through. I don't want to make too many parallels to today's society, but we see with immigration and with other topical issues that people just don't understand each other and sometimes aren't willing to try.
So they're aliens in 2 different senses.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And as the aliens adapt to our culture, they become more like us. And so I won't say that there are good humans and there are bad humans, but there are also good aliens and bad aliens. So the book has a lot of action and that teams from that
Oh, sounds fascinating.
conflict.
Yeah, it does. Now, another novel we have, A Life Removed. At least the blurb mentioned an inspector or a policeman or something again. So I'm assuming that with you being in the law profession yourself, though a different type of law, not the police, but an attorney, I assume that you have an advantage over the rest of us authors because you know how to write a police procedural or get the laws correct and so forth. And I was wondering if that's true, or do you have to go out to outside sources and research?
I am so happy you asked that question, to be honest with you, because it's probably the opposite. I do have, I would think, a huge advantage. I worked as a public defender for a little while, so I'm very familiar with Fourth Amendment law. And
Wow.
that comes up in my books, but the assumptions of what the law is out there isn't exactly what the law is. So people have these assumptions, and my law is based on Massachusetts law, which is more liberal than, say, Florida law, which is a lot more liberal than certain other countries' laws. So if you have readers outside of Massachusetts, they might know the law and might
Good
say,
point.
hey, that's not how
Great
it is
point.
here, so he's obviously wrong. Or if it's another country altogether. I do get some reviews by, somebody, and I won't mention countries because I might actually mention actual reviews, but that have been critical of my assessment of the law, even though I know it to be correct for Massachusetts. Although I have to admit, sometimes I take kind of these experimental issues and these open issues of law and put them in the books because I'd like to see how it would play out in a real life situation or a fictional situation.
Sure.
Where it hasn't been in a real life situation yet.
You write a lot of short stories?
I do. Well, I did. Haven't been lately, but I
Do you
did.
prefer to write novels over short stories?
When I start writing, if it's going to be a long story or a short story, but sometimes it ends up in the middle. I let the story dictate how long it's going to be, and I love writing short stories. I love writing novellas. I love writing novels. The story will dictate what it should be, and I won't go beyond that just to fill up pages.
Okay.
Now, you just mentioned that you write a lot of novellas. I noticed one of them, and Tony actually has it in front of him, has a really striking cover. Why don't you talk a little bit about this? Because I've never seen anything like that. And does the story actually have something like that in it?
Well, do you want me to hold it up?
Sure, yeah, please.
This is unseemly. I can't tell you if the story has something like that in it.
Ooh, okay, we'll have
because
to read
that
it.
would kind of ruin the story. But
That's a spoiler.
yes, if you look at the cover, you kind of have this beautiful fairy-like creature. But if you look more closely, there's other things in there that we won't mention. But yes, it's a dark fantasy kind of science fiction-y horror novel based on folklore, actually, Scottish folklore. And the cover itself was drawn up by a guy, Mike Tenebrae, out of South Africa. It was
Oh, wow.
intended to look kind of Tales from the Cryptish.
Yeah,
So
You succeeded.
great.
I think so, yeah.
I know what I'm buying when I get home.
There you go, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Now, since that, you said it was like a science fiction thing, and we talked about People of the Sun as a science fiction thing. Is engineering or science something that you would do if you had another life?
Well, when I went to college, I started off as pre-med. Then about a month later, I was pre-vet. Then about a month later, I was chemistry.
Jeez.
And then I
Kinda
switched my major another 18 times during my time there. So the only thing I could get out, no offense to English majors, with on time was with an English major. so that's how I ended up being an English major. But I did take 2 years of science courses, and yeah, those are soft science fiction. So it's more fantasy. But I do have a novel that I'm shopping around now. That's kind of, I guess the closest parallel would be The Thing, the movie The Thing.
Okay.
Okay, yeah.
So, but it's a Pandora virus that is causing all the harm. So I had to do a lot of
Very
biology.
cool. Yeah,
a
very
lot
cool.
of research in biology and
After all these
genomes.
changes of majors, how'd you settle on being an attorney?
didn't know what else to do in my life.
Really?
Actually, I got out of college. I became an accountant. I still don't know how. And then 2 years later,
I gotta go to law school.
2 years
Wow.
later, I got a good offer to. The company was offering layoffs, and I'm like, "Hey, free money to go to law school? Sure, why not?"
Wow.
Yeah.
Man, that's quite the
An interesting
move.
channel.
Yeah, it sure is. Good for you.
I don't advise anybody to go to law school unless they really want to be a lawyer.
Yeah. But you took advantage of the situation.
I did,
You
yeah.
did it. Yeah. Good for you. We're gonna just finish up a little bit on short stories again. Rathbone and other stories. That's a collection of your shorts.
Yes, that's this one here.
How would you describe that? I mean, what are the stories like?
Well, the first one, the title story, is about Major Henry Rathbone, who was the fellow who attended the Ford's Theater on the night of Lincoln's assassination with the Lincolns.
Mm-hmm.
So most people, at least I didn't learn about him in school, and it's probably because of the dark life he had that followed. So this takes his actual
That
life.
followed the assassination?
Yes.
Okay.
He ends up.
Don't give any
Yeah.
away. Yeah.
But any history buffs who do know about him know that where he ended up was,
Pretty dark.
but it entailed a lot of historical research. It was a lot of fun to write, but and it totally sounds intentionally like Edgar Allan Poe. I tried to write it like Poe, and if you read it and say this doesn't sound like Poe, then I failed you.
Okay. That's interesting.
Everything after that is more like the unseemly or Tales from the Crypt style stories.
Old-fashioned horror?
80s horror. I would
80s
say.
horror. Okay. That's interesting. Good.
Some campiness to it.
Yeah.
I like the tongue-in-cheek humor. One thing I do like to do is write stories that, and a lot of fans are not fans of this, with unlikable protagonists. So if I can make you like my books and my stories, even though you don't like the protagonist, then I feel like I succeeded
You
in
did your
breaking that
job.
myth.
We got one last question.
Yeah. Simple question. What's next? What's coming out?
Well,
You said you're shopping one book.
I'm shopping that one book. Yes, I have a novel and a sequel scheduled to come out with Bloodshot Books, which I don't think has been officially announced yet. So
We're the first to hear.
and then I have another novel coming out from Sinister Grin, which is traditional horror, and
You like to write.
another novel coming out from Reddit Dep. That's the sequel to Seeing Evil. And
Good Lord.
and a bizarre novella and a bizarre short story.
Do you work during the day?
I work 60 to 80 hours a week.
Oh, jeez.
Well, what people don't realize is they see me as a prolific author, but a lot of these stories I wrote starting in like 2004, and I just started selling them all at once.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Gonna read for us?
If you'd like me to.
Sure.
Yeah.
Take a couple minutes. Let's come up with something here.
Oh, here's a book we haven't even talked about.
Yeah, the probably the cleanest of my stories since is Werewolves Run, and it's got a very
Oh, what a trick name. Werewolves Run.
yeah.
I like it.
Where obviously it's a staple in the horror
Trope,
field,
yep.
yeah. But so I try to do it from a classic Bavarian style werewolf, going back to the 17th century. So I'll read for that, and let's.
Go ahead. Yes. Yeah.
Please.
Conrad's father had been hunting the beast since long before his birth. Father's pursuit had brought him all across Europe, from the coldest wilderness of Muscovy to the hidden glens of the French Alps. Weary feet had at last turned him toward Rattenberg. Years of traveling had brought him home. But it was not a happy return. Their quiet house sat beyond the outskirts of the declining town, its neighboring copper and silver mines picked clean. Lost souls seeking fortunes had been lured away by new mirages, leaving behind those who had sprouted from centuries-old Bavarian roots, never caring which empire claimed them. Theirs was a simple home, a mixture of wood, wattle, and daub, providing a safe haven for Conrad and his family. He and his mother worked the land, grew more than they needed to survive, and traded the surplus. Meat came from the hunt, and at 12 years old, Conrad had already become quite good with the bow. He hunted raven and deer in the surrounding forest and protected the livestock from the occasional wolf. Thin and lively, he pranced over the rock and root with the grace of those indigenous to the forest. Mostly, he and his mother lived home alone, happy. Father was away most of the year, bartering or taking odd jobs in far places. When he stopped home, it was never long enough before he left on some new adventure. Conrad did not know much about father, nor did he care to learn. The man had been no true father to him. And all the time father spent away, Conrad worried that he had been the reason for his father's absence, whether his father had ever loved him at all. After years of doubt and remorse, Conrad eventually stopped caring, and so died the last embers of affection he fostered for his kin. Conrad knew as little of the world beyond his home's border as he knew for the man who had abandoned him for it. Their land sat at the southern edge of a vast wilderness, and Conrad had come to know all the wild within it. The trees were his playground, the streams his pools. He felt at home there, free from daily chores and mother's orders. Yet Conrad had never met or seen before the wild things that arrived on their doorstep. These beasts were worse than savage. They were evil. When they came one night in late September, Mother seemed as though she knew what they were and why they were there. Father was away on some vague trip in the mountains in the west. He had left Conrad and his mother alone to face an unspeakable brute and his cohorts in sin. Mother shoved aside the wooden table upon which they had finished their supper. Beneath it, the floor consisted of large flat stones arranged like puzzle pieces in dirt. The largest was irregularly shaped, nearly 2 meters long and less than a meter wide. Yanking a pickaxe from the wall, she drove it into the dirt and wedged it beneath the rock, prying it loose. "Get in," she urged. She propped up the slab at an angle. Howling broke the silence outside. Wolves. Their haunting refrains came from all directions. Quickly, her voice was slow but sharp. She pulled him close, her wet cheek smearing his. She assisted him into the hole. A clever but unlearned boy, Conrad did not fully understand his mother's apprehension. Still, he did as she commanded. His big brown eyes widened as his mother lowered the lid, blocking all but a crack of the hearth's warm glow. She told him, begged him to stay quiet no matter what he might hear. He nodded, chin quivering, knowing something was terribly wrong, his imagination filling in the details. Shock made him keep his promise. He choked up in panic as terrifying sounds, growling and pounding, came from just outside. Scratching at the walls followed. The nauseating cacophony traveled through the dirt as if to mark Conrad for his cowardice as he lay in his sarcophagus. Is that what those demonic creatures were doing? Taunting them? If so, the taunting stopped. A moment of silence gave life to hope. It shattered as easily as the door beneath some terrible force. Conrad peeked through the crack, but his view was limited. He heard a struggle above. His mother spoke not a word. Her scream said it all.
That was great.
Nice.
That was excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for joining us this evening, and hopefully folks will check out some of your work. They're anywhere books are sold, specifically online is probably the easiest place.
Yeah.
And it's good that you have some more stuff that we can look forward to coming out.
These are all for you. Thank you
geez.
for having me on the show.
Well, we're going to have you back then.
Yeah, absolutely.
I got more coming out, so you can have another stack.
Thank you, Jason.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
And we'll be back in a minute. Thank you very much. Wow, what a show tonight, huh?
Yeah, actually, both Scott and Jason knew each other, and I didn't know that until I met Jason at the convention, and so it was good to have both of them on at the same time.
It was, Scott is a dear friend, you know, the kind of guy you hug whenever you see him. You know, I just love Scott, and he's been around forever, and the work he does with the...
He's the team leader.
Well, he is, with the NHEW is just fantastic, and I think he's great. And I've known Jason. I don't know him well. Tonight's the first night I really got a chance to talk to him at length.
Sure,
and I'm really impressed with him. And I just, good things going to happen with Jason.
Yeah. I was actually surprised. I had never met him through any of the events that we've all gone to, and the fact that he's in the New England Horror Writers Association until at the convention, and he came over and bought my book.
Jeez.
So so it was great meeting him, and now we get to learn more about him.
Yeah, we've got to get them both back on. I mean, Scott's been on a few times already, but he's always welcome back anytime, and as well as Jason.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And Jason, before you came in, we were talking, and he said he did an interview where he mentioned my name, and I said, really? And he said, yeah. He said if I could work with anybody in the industry right now, and I'm assuming he means New England.
Yeah,
group.
of course.
He said I'd want to work with Tony Tremblay. So that,
Nice.
I mean,
That's good.
yeah, that's it made me feel really good.
Yeah.
Jason's a nice guy, not just because he said that, but just a nice guy, and it made me feel good that he said it.
Yeah. No, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
Two good guests once again.
Yeah, and we'll be back in August here with hopefully the full group. And before that, we will have a show of some kind from Nikon. We're not quite sure how we're going to do it yet.
I do have a cute story about Jason. So I met him at the convention, and I was doing a panel, and I asked him to join, and he chickened out.
Oh, the panel?
Yeah, he wouldn't do it. He was a guest he wasn't a guest at the convention. He was just coming to the convention. And I said, hey, you're in the NEHW, come on. And he goes, and the person he was with was trying to get him to do it, but goaded him to do it, and he chickened out.
Well, we'll have to rib them a little bit tonight over tacos.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, thanks, everybody. We'll see you soon.